Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to Hilaal Live. Thanks for watching us on channel 347. Also on our live stream, www.hilaal.tv. Today we've got two very important people in studio and discussing an even more important topic with regards to the way South Africa's political climate gets shaped, which then has a ripple effect on all of us that is so passionate about our beautiful country. First up, I'd like to welcome back our attorney, Igshaan Higgins. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam, Luqman, and to the viewers.
Jazakallah so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. And then a stalwart that's been advocating for a better South Africa and someone that's kept his pulse on politics for many, many years, Dr. Allan Boesak. Good evening and welcome.
Good evening. Thank you very much, and to the viewers.
My absolute pleasure. It's a great honor you coming into our studio discussing a very important topic. We've all seen in the news, we've seen the conversations around the government of national unity. We've had input from stakeholders all over around the world as well. But Igshaan, in terms of our constitution, the government of national unity, where does it leave us with regards to our constitution? How do we look at it from the constitution point of view?
Firstly, I think it's a very interesting question, and I'm sure every lawyer in South Africa is obviously thinking about this. Because what's happening at the moment, I mean, the constitution is quite clear in terms of the role of the president, in terms of Section 85. Then there's also other action items that the president is actually given in terms of the constitution. And the most important one is actually appointing a cabinet. Right. I mean, that is in terms of Section 91. I'm going to read it actually so that people can know what it is. It says the president, A, must select the deputy president from among the members of the National Assembly, and B, may select any number of ministers from among the members of the Assembly. And he may select no more than 2 ministers from outside of the Assembly. So for me, the Constitution is very clear on this particular issue. And of course, there's no other law that tops the Constitution.
Correct.
So if people are making little agreements outside of the constitutional framework, and then that agreement may be fine until there's a problem. Because if there's a problem, they will have to resort to the courts to resolve the problem.
Gotcha.
And of course, the courts will be bound by what is contained in the Constitution, which means it reverts back to the fact that the president has the right to appoint a cabinet.
And at the same time, has the right to fire various members.
Well, you serve at the behest of the president.
Yeah.
I mean, so the president, I mean, they've gone through the first process where the president has been appointed in the first sitting. So what happens next is, obviously, the president must now appoint various role players, like the deputy president, like the cabinet. But it seems that that's where this government of national unity, this is where the stumbling block is in terms of who goes into the cabinet. And for me, it's like if they fail to come up with a solution, then, of course, the courts must make a decision, and the courts will have to revert to the Constitution. And the Constitution is pretty clear as to who makes that decision.
Yeah. And I think who better to give us a broader perspective, Dr. Boesak, for, being part of our heritage for so long and being so passionate about South Africa, which we all share as well. You know, if we ask somebody that's watching this now, they're going to ask you, what the hell, Khanan? You know, in terms of, because it's so confusing at the moment.
It is the question. It is very confusing. I almost have, I was going to say that it is a planned confusion. Because if people are confused and nobody knows what is happening, then you can do a lot of things. As Donald Trump used to say, you put facts on the ground. By the time we wake up, things have been done and decided, and then everybody says, well, we just have to move on. That's the one thing. The constitutionality is an issue. For me, what is the other problem, perhaps the greater problem that this government of national unity, as they call it, might flounder on, is the fact that they have no political authenticity. and they have no authority, because the foundations upon which this government of national unity is built is no foundation at all. It is cracking there. They put out those principles that the president talked about. But every single one of those 8 principles, the president has flouted from the moment he opened his mouth.
Right.
In his first term of office. So everybody knows that he doesn't mean what he says, that he has already broken every law that he says he will ethically protect. And so when you have that, and then you have the situation where the ANC has miscalculated, and so they thought that they could actually go into this sort of disguised coalition with the DA, and the DA thought the same thing. But now, with the constitutional problems and with the political problems and with the fight for position, they have brought on all those other political parties, not to make a substantial value-based contribution to the situation or to help us look, but everybody just to put more people on the other side of the scale of the DA. But that is such an open admission of its own weakness. You can't build on weakness. You can't build on deception. You can't build on misguiding the people. And those are the issues that I'm looking at. And I think the cracks are showing in the issues that Igshaan has mentioned, but the cracks are also showing in the pure fact that this is a government who does not have the confidence of the people. This debate that we are seeing is a debate that I have been praying for, but for 50 years. Our people have let all of these things go by. Nobody jumped in. Nobody said anything. Nobody wanted to be part of any discussion. Now there's discussion everywhere. And I think the power of this discussion can be explosive.
That's a very good point. We're going to open up the WhatsApp lines as well for you, our viewer, to comment and ask any questions to our 2 esteemed guests in studio. You're welcome to send a WhatsApp. We only take in WhatsApp messages, no telephone calls, unfortunately. We're going to put the number up on the screen very shortly. So for you that's at home, sitting at home, can WhatsApp your question. Igshaan, I think one of the concerns that most South Africans have, and maybe keeping a very close eye on the caucus, that's the opposition, if you want to call it in inverted commas, do they know something that we don't know? I mean, surely they are looking at it from very different eyes, very different perspective on how the GNU
when
is going to be.
When you speak about opposition, are you speaking about
the
people
caucus
outside of the GNU?
That's correct.
Like the MK and the EFF?
That's correct.
Well, I think they are being left in the cold at the moment. And I think they've got a few options. One option is already in the Constitutional Court.
Okay.
And maybe Doc can also speak about that a little bit. But that's the one option, is for the election results to be overturned. And then, of course, the president will be obliged constitutionally to call for another election within 90 days. Well, that's the one option. And the other option is for the country to go under protest. I mean, it's happened before.
We're looking at what's going on in Kenya now at the moment as well.
So I think that's real possibilities. It's not scaremongering. I mean, it's something that if this purported GNU don't get it right, and as I say, I think it's flawed already. I mean, those demands that were made about cabinet positions, deputy president, the head of government business, and of course DGs. I mean, the Constitution is very clear that the administration serves the government of the day. I think it is Section 1971 of the Constitution, very clear as to who the administration serves. You can't have a situation where a political party comes and says, well, now you must serve the agenda or the manifesto of a political party. That's not going to happen. And of course, the big issue is this thing that they call sufficient consensus. It's too fragile, way too fragile. I mean, what were they thinking when they negotiated sufficient consensus? Where you have two of the main actors, they are like polar opposites politically on simple issues. the minimum wage issue, the Palestinian issue, the issue of affirmative action and BEE. I mean, these are fundamental issues that these two parties are not sitting, they're not at idem on these things. So to get sufficient consensus on things like, on those things and many other things, it's way too fragile. Yeah. So I don't want to be a doomsayer, but I mean, from my perspective, this GNU, I think it's doomed to failure.
Sure. We're going to unpack more of this on the WhatsApp line 079-085-2511. You're welcome to send through your questions, your comments. We've got Igshaan and Dr. Boesak in studio who will try their level best to answer those questions as well. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll continue with Hilaal Live. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Hilaal Live. Thanks for watching us. We've got two very important guests in studio unpacking our latest reveal about all the various parties that have joined the Government of National Unity and just various aspects of how this all gets navigated going forward. In studio, our attorney friend, Igshaan Higgins. I was going to say Dr. Igshaan Higgins. Not there. And then Dr. Allan Boesak as well. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming in. Really appreciate it. I'm, getting to understand some of the parameters around a way forward, which is very confusing for the layman in the street. And maybe if I can start with Dr. Boesak as well, in terms of, and a lot of people are considering and wondering about this, the world has become so small that we've started to diversify our input with regards to economic gain and international trade, international expectation of the way South Africa gets run. Everyone's watching what the GNU is now going to do going forward. What's your take on that?
Well, clearly, if this GNU goes through, it will have a serious impact on all of the issues that you have mentioned, domestic policy, but also foreign policy.
Yeah.
The continent of Africa is moving quite rapidly under a younger leadership in a different direction. They're moving away from Western imperialist control. They're moving from a unipolar world controlled by the United States and with Europe hiding under its skirts. They're moving towards a multipolar world led by China and Russia.
Yeah.
The G7 comes together and makes a decision, and then everybody must see those are 7 white countries representing what, 20% of the world population.
Yeah.
And if you look at what used to be called that other organization, not the G20, the larger one that China was leading, there was last year 137 countries present at that conference. Look at the number of countries, 27 countries from the global south at the St. Petersburg Forum just the other day. There's a whole new geopolitical shift. There's a geo-economic shift. The world is no longer, certainly Africa and Asia, no longer wants to be under the thumb of the Western world.
I agree.
And if you see not just economically and politically, but see the diplomatic moves that China and Russia have been making toward Africa and towards the rest of the world over the last year, it's actually stunning. In the lexicon of the United States, diplomacy no longer exists. There's no such word. It's either bullying or blackmail or sanctions or war. You do what we say or we blow you out of the water. When Biden made his very first speech after his election, I listened to him, and when he said the U.S. is back, not at the table, but at the top of the table, I knew this is a thing that is going to alienate more people than he might think. And this is where we are right now. So the GNU with the DA clearly clinging to America, clearly clinging to a white-controlled, new liberal capitalist world. That cannot be the future for South Africa. The consequences for us in terms of geo-economic situation and geopolitics, the consequences for us for economic policy at home and what that may mean for our people, those are worlds apart. And if the misery of the people grows under this GNU, that's why I'm hoping it doesn't last too long, because we've had enough misery by now. Then you will have what my colleague has said. You are looking towards a situation where it's going to be so explosive that people will burst out in protest in the streets. And I think that postponed the revolution that we should have had in the 1980s and everybody predicted.
Now.
And we did not get, by the mercy of God, I must say, not through the cleverness of the silly agreements that they made that's catching up with us now. But we've had that, and we missed that. Now, 30 years later, every problem that we have in 1994 has been compounded and has been multiplied. And so the anger that we see will burst out. Watch Kenya. Watch what we see. People thought that the Arab Spring was just a come and go thing. I think it is what some scholar called an ongoing Palestinian intifada with a multiple faceted reality across the third world. That is not a world in which this particular GNU can survive.
Oh. Well said. We've got the WhatsApp line open for our viewers as well, 079-085-2511. You're welcome to send us any questions, comments that you may have. Very important that you said that as well, because I mean, at the moment, America's more worried about their data being stolen and their privacy laws being infringed on than actually humanitarian efforts that needs to be sent out to a larger part. And speaking about humanitarian efforts, Igshaan, the DA has been largely unsympathetic to the genocide that's been happening in Gaza. Now that they've joined the GNU, which means, to a large point, a partnership with ANC, who's then led the charge to advocate for the ceasefire in Gaza as well, are we not letting our supporters down who've managed to support the ANC and various other political parties when they led the charge?
I think that it goes way beyond one item or two items. Certainly, as I said earlier on, Palestine will be a casualty of this GNU. That's almost guaranteed, because there's so many compromises that has to be made for the benefit of South Africa at this point in time. I would say that those people that supported the ANC as a result of their stance on Palestine, as a result of their stance on BRICS, and so many other items. I mean, some people can go right back to the Freedom Charter on this issue. Why are they supporting the ANC? When the ANC started with this first, there was talks of a coalition, and then, of course, it became talks of a GNU, which for me seems like it's a coalition in another form.
Correct.
But the reality of it is that there's a poem that goes like this. There's something in there that says, "The center won't hold." It was by W.B. Yeats. Yeah, the center is not going to hold. But as I say, they are way too far apart. And the disgusting part of it, and I'm going to say disgusting, before they even looked at what was good for South Africa or for South Africans, in terms of the poverty, in terms of the inequality, in terms of all the problems that we have, our unemployment rate, the elderly, the problems and the abuses attached to it. Before they got to the problems, they first looking at the positions
that they're going to hold.
I mean, the ministerial positions, the bodyguards and the residences that they're having, and the ministerial handbook. They probably studied it already. But the point is, how can you be looking at positions before you've even agreed on the fundamental things that's affecting your ordinary voter today? The person who voted for the party and said, "Listen, I'm putting my faith in this particular political party," and before you know it, you're negotiating with the purported enemy. I mean, I'm going to say enemy because in Parliament, that's what you see. It's people that are opposed to each other's views. They are intolerant of each other's views even. So the reality is that voters are disappointed.
Dr. Boesak, I want to bring you in before we close in terms of, rounding up this segment and maybe dumbing it down to a large degree for the layman in the street, because it is very confusing, it's worrying, and to also highlight and bring in maybe the Palestinian issue. You've been a very strong advocate for a ceasefire in quite a few of our events that we've covered as well. What are your thoughts?
Okay, look, Gaza is clearly the political point of departure for all of us at this point, morally, politically, ethically, all of that. So, and Gaza is the point where we have pushed the South African government on very, very hard. Yeah. They have not even done the things that are in our power to do, like shutting down the embassies, yes, sending back those diplomats, shutting down our ports for trade, making BDS part of government policy. They have not even touched that. And one of the things that's going to be on the chopping block almost from the very start is the International Court of Justice.
Right.
That's
what we all worried about.
The ICC, the DA will support, because that deals with individuals that you can then pick and choose when they don't do what America wants them to do, as we can see. But the ICJ is a totally different matter. And so all of those issues, but for me, that means that this GNU will not be able to make the model choice for what is the greatest challenge for the authenticity of our faith and for the integrity of our politics of this time. And if you fail that on that level, and if you remember how Palestine encapsulates the struggles for justice and freedom and dignity almost of the whole world right now, then you are on the shaky ground that I talked about in the beginning.
Brilliant. Thank you so very much for coming into studio. We really appreciate your input and also that passion that you have for a better South Africa. And we always look forward to inviting you back at some other time as well. We're wishing you a lovely evening. Thank you. Igshaan, thank you to you, sir, for also coming in and educating us around constitutionally how we need to look at things as well. Really appreciate it. Shukran. And that's all that we have for on Hilaal Live. We're back tomorrow between 5 and 6. Do join us then as well. From all of us in Cape Town, Sohail Barnes, we've got Mohammed Parker, and from myself, Lukman Shadrack. Have a great evening. Assalamu alaikum.